Thank you, David, and thanks to all of you for taking time from your life to be here. It's always an honor to be welcomed back to speak again, so I really appreciate this opportunity to be with all of you. We are a tribe. We are a very unique tribe of people who are helping to end the suffering, and that's what we hold in our hearts as we work every day. This is my family, and I was 7 years old when my baby brother was born, and this is when I started changing diapers. So I consider that to be my beginning training as a colon hydrotherapist. No problem. Back then, they did not have disposable diapers. So we had to throw it in the toilet and clean the diaper. Anybody remember this? Or is it my gray hair that is, oh gosh. Now it's so much easier, yes? So I was a party girl. This is my 10th birthday party. And shortly after this, I had a lot of cavities in my teeth. And of course, now you can see how that happened. In a family with 10 children, you did not ever pretend you were sick. It didn't matter whether you said you had a headache or a stomach ache or a sore throat. My grandmother would give you an enema. So this was my next initiation into becoming a colon hydrotherapist. Of course, I had no idea at the time. I just knew I felt better after she put that water in my rectum. I would like to acknowledge my two major mentors who are helping me continue this exciting field of research. This is Mango Mike, my handsome husband, who is responsible for all of the research that I'm giving you. He's like a dog digging. He loves to find new research. And this is Dr. Thomas Rau, my teacher in Switzerland. You can reach him at this Paracelsus Academy website. This is the first medical doctor who ever acknowledged the necessity for colon hydrotherapy in the cleansing process. One of my students came to Switzerland where I was teaching. Michael and I were invited there first time, 1995. And she brought me his videos. These were the big old boxes. Anybody remember the big old boxes of videos? I couldn't believe what I was hearing from this man. He proposed in his special field of biological medicine, Swiss biological medicine, that all disease begins in the mouth. And that if we just clean up the mouth, we can clean up the entire body's ecosystems. I'm sure many of you know we have several microbiomes that are very complex as they interact with our health on the outside, starting with our skin, and of course on the inside with our digestive processes. But this was a fascinating piece for me. We are more bacteria than we are human cells. If you could see me under an infrared light, and the rest of you as well, you would see that we are actually surrounded by this cloud of bacteria. And right now we have a distinct microbiome in this room with all of these clouds interconnecting. We're inhaling each other and exhaling each other. These are just a few of the bacteria that they are isolating on the skin. This one really shocked me. They took samples on the train and they began to try to identify what they were finding on the doorknobs and on the seats and on the railings. Almost half of it was unrecognizable organism. 48% they had no idea what it was. So what I love about this particular slide is the very last sentence. We are still in uncharted territory with the microbiome research. We're just beginning to understand how big this is, and I think it will remain a mystery for as long as I'm alive. Clearly, there's a controversy now. Does the mother's microbiome influence generations to follow? Scientists are actually split on this. But of course, the birth process can make a huge difference. Was it a joyous event? Were you a wanted baby? How healthy were your parents? Were they drinking? Were they smoking? What was your birth process? Is it a C-section? You missed the vaginal microbiome coating your body if you have a C-section. Was your mother given a lot of medications? Were you breastfed? Was the home a happy home? This will influence the health of this child for the rest of their lives. So this is the question that the science are asking. Could the baby's very first bacteria even take place and take root in the baby's body before they're born? I just love my husband Michael because he blows me away with the research that he finds. When I started putting this together and I looked at the influences that really give us what we have happening in our bodies and our minds, beliefs and awareness is bigger than the environmental choices, the life choices, and epigenetics has been scientifically documented to only influence 17.9% of what's happening. When people say, oh, it's just my genes, you must remind them, 17.9% is your genes. That gives you over 80% influence over how your body responds with health and well-being. Nutritional choices absolutely change gene expression. Now, I will admit this was a small study of 786 individuals, but there it is in writing. It was quite profound for us to find this. So what are we carrying around? They have broken it into several categories, viruses, et cetera, I'm not going to go into all of that because I think it's a field of study that, again, will grow. But for now, we just keep in mind how complex we are, and the people walking into our practices are just a big bag of bugs. There are two main families. We heard about this morning. Bacteroides has turned out to be the most prevalent and the best bacteria. It thrives on fiber, not sugars. Firmicutes, on the other hand, is more prevalent in people who have a tendency to gain weight. This particular bacteria makes you more efficient at extracting calories from your food. So it can really tip the scale around weight control. How many of you have heard of this research regarding the gut microbiome being a separate endocrine organ, particularly the mesentery? This is something I would invite you to study. It's unbelievably interesting because it's cross-talking with the host. The host means you. So here's what happens. You get all this information in this separate microbiome, this second brain, and it starts traveling up, goes through your heart brain, then to your head brain. 80% of that is happening all day long and all night long, even while you're sleeping. This vagus nerve is the fast track. It's the super highway for all of this information that's going up and down. The bacteria has recently been found to emit an electrical charge. So it's making a signal from the gut up to the heart first and then the head second. And here's what it looks like when you are cross-sectioning the inside. I love this because David showed this earlier as well. So this enteric nervous system is a separate, autonomous, unique system. It has no direct link to your head brain. It has to talk through the autonomic nervous system. It sits between the layers of the muscles. It has more neurons than your brain and your spinal cord combined, but it produces a lot of the same chemicals. And of course, it's secreting immune factors as well as endocrine factors. So this is a very busy nervous system. The vagus nerve is the main communicator. It also speaks to the immune system, then to the cardiovascular system. So the epithelial lining is actually sending signals through the portal vein up to your liver. That's where the endocrine dance is primarily happening. Then if you have inflammation, and I know someone's going to be presenting on leaky gut syndrome, which we'll touch on, this can inflame the endothelium, which is in the inner lining of the villi. What I want you to understand about this is that it's not just dysbiosis. We have all these other endorphins and chemical messengers that are responsible for our joy, our feeling of satisfaction. How many of you have heard people after your colonic session say, I feel so much relief? Yes, this is an important piece of information that's actually a neurochemical process. But what I really want you to understand is that we have a direct link now in the research between gut health and heart health through this process. And of course, it requires lots of oxygen. So let's all take a deep breath. Because we're breathing each other anyway. It's all happening through the vagus nerve. So here's a really simple cascade to look at. Mouth and teeth, upset by processed food and all those candies and cakes and cookies I had as a little girl. This degrades the microbiome. Now you have a challenge in the epithelial layer, leaky gut. That carries the inflammatory signal into the endothelium, which is the lining of this vein and artery. Dysregulation of the immune system, which we heard about this morning, autoimmune challenges, people coming to you with endocrine challenges. And of course, last on my list is epigenetics. So, all of this is cascading to give us the epidemic that we have now with the autoimmune diseases, diabetes, obesity, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and dementia. So once again, I lean into my teachings from Dr. Rao in Switzerland, because he will say, I don't care what you got, it starts in your gut. When you go to his clinic, the first thing they do is clean your teeth and clean your gut. He says it very, very simply. The teeth are always involved. I so appreciate this slide this morning with the periodontal disease. Did you know that every tooth relates to a meridian of the body? How many of you knew about this connection? This is very, very wonderful. Every tooth relates to a different meridian of the body. So in my case, you're going to see my mouth before I had all this cleaned up. I had all these molars in the back full of mercury, amalgams, root canals, and I had chronic challenges with my lungs, my spleen deficiency. It's been amazing to see the connections. This is Cathy Shea's mouth. By the time she was 16 years old, my mouth was full of amalgams and root canals. And the biggest investment I made in my life was getting this all cleaned up, because this is my mouth now, thanks to Thomas Rao. And of course, my husband, who said, yes, we're going to invest in your health. Because it was expensive, but it was worth it. Honestly, I think he guided me to save my own life, because I had heavy metal poisoning, and none of the medical doctors knew what it was. They didn't even know how to begin testing me for it. So here's what happens. Just like the lightning in the sky can strike a tree or strike something and cause damage, every metal carries an electrical charge. And Dr. Rao talks about the teeth being the shelf for the brain. So we have all this electricity in our brain, neurological patterning, and when we get an electrical field in the teeth, it creates what is called disturbance field, galvanic field. So this irritation can actually affect other areas of the body. It can show up as everything we see every day in our practice. Please start looking in their mouths. Start giving them something else to think about as the source of the potential challenges that they are having. And of course, we're on the forefront of the leaders in the industry, cleansing and rebuilding. And this young man is very animated for a Swiss guy. He always gets up and jumps up and down. We must reduce the toxic load. I've never seen a Swiss guy do that before, but he does it. So, how do we test for leaky gut? They now have a blood test to check for levels of zonulin. This is a protein molecule that shows up in the blood, and if it's high, it's likely that you have altered gut microbiome, and they, of course, have linked this to anxiety and depression. This came out last year with the British Society of Gastroenterology. Zonulin is a protein that modulates this permeability, this interesting connection between the villi. We want tight connections in our small intestine. Leaky gut is a small intestine condition. So if those villi have gaps, then bigger molecules are going to get in. And that's what upsets this gut-brain axis. So once again, we have this communication highway between the vagus nerve, with the vagus nerve taking information from the gut up to the heart and to the brain. So, everything centers around gut functions, whether it's leaky gut, metabolic syndrome, high levels of cortisol in their saliva. Anybody testing for cortisol in their saliva? This is crucial, crucial. If cortisol is not properly balanced throughout the day, you should be collecting 4 times throughout the day because it has a very beautiful circadian rhythm. If it's too high at night, you'll be awake all night. I had this problem going on for a long time. I thought it was menopause. I think maybe it was, partially, because when you're in menopause, you're under more stress, okay, just naturally. At any rate, this is a very big marker for digestive upset, because if cortisol is upset, so is digestion. We have an epidemic of this pre-diabetes, insulin resistance. The receptors are not connecting. When cortisol goes up, left brain function goes down. Now we break a nail and it's like the end of the world. Or, you know, the cat gets out of the house and we're screaming at the children over this minor thing. So the right brain emotional centers take over and we cannot go back into logic, linear thinking, and see that it's not that big a deal. Inflammatory cytokines go up, toxic load goes up, and then you have this vicious circle, just like this. So we have internal stressors, which we heard about, the endotoxins, and the external stressors, the exotoxins. So it all starts with inflammation in the gut, can be caused by food sensitivities, certainly medications and many other toxic substances in the water. So now you have leaky gut, you cannot absorb the nutrients well, the liver becomes stressed in stage 5, and then this is the big one, because you see this during your colon hydrotherapy. The liver begins excreting toxic bile. This goes back into circulation and burns the villi in the leaky gut again. How many of you see big surges of bile when you have clients on the table doing colon hydrotherapy? These big surges of like neon green and gold. It's always a good thing. Always a good thing. So this field of research that I'm just touching on in this 45 minutes is something you definitely want to continue to look towards for your own growth, and certainly to educate our clientele and our people. How many of you are instructors that are apprenticing people or teaching? Great, wonderful. This is going to be important to add to your curriculum. Send them to YouTube. Watch this piece, because this is right up to date. So it started back in 2008 with the Human Microbiome Project, and these were all the countries that were involved in this incredible endeavor that was worthy of the millions of dollars that they invested. And Wall Street Journal actually did a big expose on this. Right now we have over 103.4% increase in investments. Billions of dollars are being invested in this research. We now have the wherewithal and the funding available for us to move forward with this. This is as of January. There were 120 companies investing. I think by now it's doubled. Kudos to Australia, my colleague Sue Wilson. They funded a beautiful center at St. George's in Sydney, $4 million by the federal government. This is gigantic. It's not just the private sector. We now have governmental funding coming in, which is a very wonderful thing. This piece of research talks about how the microbiome influences autoimmune diseases elsewhere in the body. And this is what the doctor was talking about this morning. There's a unique microbiome in every joint of your body. It's fascinating. So again, he linked it to lupus, MS, psoriasis, and of course, these mood and emotional challenges, schizophrenia, autism. So once again, we're back to this cortisol link and how it is affecting the metabolism. So the metabolic syndrome is epidemic. I found this fascinating when I was doing my homework on serotonin, because I was reading about how we produce 90 to 95% of it in our small intestine. Did everybody know this? Raise your hand if you knew this. This is big. What was interesting was it's a cell called the enterochromaffin cell. And entero, of course, relates to the gut. Chromaffin relates to the chromium salt reaction shared by chromaffin cells in the adrenal glands. Now you understand this link between cortisol and the gut functions. They also found that this cell is regulating bone density. So as a woman coming through menopause out the other side, it wasn't about taking drugs to try to strengthen my bones. It was really about reducing stress and making sure that my serotonin levels were stronger. So I have a dream that we would be doing some other studies like David is doing. Congratulations, this was fascinating this morning. Wouldn't it be great if we could take blood and check serotonin levels before and after colon hydrotherapy series? I'm going to ask my colleagues here from the Caribbean to try this and see what they find. Because there's a medical doctor in our midst that's a very wonderful, open-minded person, and his beautiful wife is here. Thank you for coming. I met them in Florida, and now they're here. Please talk to these people. They're brilliant. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, healthful longevity, linked to the microbiome, cancer. Immunotherapy is the latest in America. Is it big here? It's really big as a way to manage cancers. But here's what they found in some of this research. If your Bacteroides wasn't strong, the immunotherapy wouldn't work. If you had too much Firmicutes, remember that one that causes obesity? The immunotherapy wasn't as effective. So they're really beginning to start making connections between individual families of bacteria in some of the more interesting connections. Parkinson's disease, motor deficits, directly linked to inflammation. It's called Neuro Inflammation now. This is one of the leaders in the field. I put his YouTube up here because you're going to see this presentation on YouTube. And if you go to this link, you'll hear him speak in English, of course. He's from Ireland, but he's obese. You can see. But he's a leading researcher on the gut microbiome. He has made a map of the bacteria to the neurotransmitters. He has been able to isolate which bacteria actually make the serotonin, which supports this. This is phenomenal research. I presented this in Italy in 2015, and I predicted they would be prescribing probiotics instead of Prozac. And guess what? That's what they're doing. They now have a whole new terminology for this field. It's called psychobiotics. And of course, all the drug companies are involved. So there you have it. But wouldn't it be great if we could give somebody something that would really benefit them instead of causing more leaky gut like the other medications do? It's a whole new field of study. This is a phenomenal young woman, Emily Deans. Sue, you would love to hear her YouTube here because she talks about using worm bacteria as a way to help when there's dysbiosis. She is way over here on the left side of what I consider to be sanity. But I love her because she's a young mother. She is researching toddlers, junk food, because she has children. So these women are just remarkable for, changing the contemporary mental health challenges, starting with the children. This is a Dr. Emran Mayer from Germany originally. He's now at University of California in Los Angeles. He's the leader when it comes to the autistic connection and how gut processes and emotions regulate health while we're sleeping. I don't know about you, but I just find all this so fascinating. Another beautiful woman, young mother, she sent me 2 people to train. She has a big clinic up in New Jersey, and she's part of the Functional Medicine Network. Anybody know this? Functional Medicine is a global organization, Functional Medicine Institute. They have a beautiful certification program that you can also take, and she's one of the leaders there. She did a free webinar last September, a year ago, on the gut-brain connection and helping heal the children. This was one of my favorite clients because she always wore very, very cute socks. When I teach, I have people come in from my community to work with my students. And it's always fun to see how they interact with these strangers after working on me and one another, of course. And this woman always delivers huge releases. So what we've learned with our very gentle Shea way and our slow fill method is how important it is to pay attention to the autonomic nervous system patterning that shows up with the client. Obviously, we're controlling temperature and pressure, but this individualized client pacing is so important. Sue and I talked about this last night at dinner. You cannot do the same thing all day, every day for each person that comes in. So what I teach is how do you know what to do? How do you adapt to what is being presented with this autonomic nervous system? So we can increase muscle tone, increase relaxation. Vagal tone is all about relaxation. So I'd like to just have you do a small practice with me. If you'll put your pens and your papers down and just rub your hands together. One of the ways you can increase vagal tone is by charging your hands with your heart energy. So that you want to imagine your heart is actually making this friction and this electricity. And now you're going to close your eyes and you're going to just stroke your face very gently with your hands down to your neck, as light as possible. Breathing and relaxing. Breathing and relaxing. Breathing and relaxing. And just notice how different you feel right this moment after just a few seconds of doing what I call vagal stimulation, relaxation. So important. So, let's talk more about this vagus nerve and how we can actually use this knowledge. My goal for this lecture was to send you home with some tools in your toolbox. So I just gave you one. Now I'm going to give you another one, and this has really made a huge difference in my practice. Thank you, Michael Shea, my handsome husband. Did you know that the vagus nerve ends in your transverse colon? How many of you knew that? Oh, bravissima. Now I'm speaking Italian, because from here I go to Italy. Germany, Spain, Italy. It's good life. So you can actually touch this point while you're on the empty cycle, and you can see some profound changes in these clients' responses. So how do you find it? You're going to use the client's right hand, 3 fingers close together. The ring finger is going to go in the umbilicus, so there you can see that there's this diagonal line toward the spleen, right? And right here where that third finger is a very close approximation. I love that you're trying this on yourself right now. This is great. That's a very close approximation of where you'll find Cannon's point. I think it was discovered by Dr. Cannon, and that's how it got the name. Sort of like the sphincter of Odie. That was Dr. Odie. And the valves of Houston. That was Dr. Houston. So, in the second half of the session, after you've been successful in getting water in and you've noticed vagal tone is coming up, they're starting to relax. How many of you have people go to sleep during your colonics? That's the highest compliment, because now you know you've really activated the vagus nerve. But if you still have challenges with some of these people and they're not able to relax, you can have them touch this point or take their own pulse. When they take their own pulse, you have two pathways that open up. The first one is the connection with the heart. What could be better than that? Nothing. And if they can identify how the heartbeat goes faster on the inhale and slower on the exhale, this will take their mind off their problems, because they come to us and they tell us all their stories, right? How many of you have heard this sentence? Oh, I've never told this to anybody before. So we hear the secrets, right? And of course, it gives us a chance to open our hearts and be present and hold that in our hearts. Because we're not there to fix anybody. We're certainly not there to engage them in a psychological conversation, unless you're qualified to do so and it's in your informed consent. So how do we simply hold the space for them to share what they are sharing while they're noticing their heartbeat and something might emerge, because we all hear these revelations. And how can we be the ones who are present for these revelations and allow them to share with no judgment, no advice? I think the hardest thing I do is keep my mouth closed during the treatment session, because I think I know what somebody else needs. This is the height of arrogance. I did it for so long, but thank God I got some gray hair, and I learned I don't know what anybody needs. Half the time I don't even know what I need. So, some other tips that you can take back with you. I'm sure you all know about the value of bone broth, coconut milk, avocado, olives, all these good fats that most people are really not eating. There's still a lot of misinformation around fats in the diet, but this fat is what heals the gut lining. And it is not bone broth in a can of powder. That is not bone broth. If you want to make bone broth, you go to the butcher and you get clean meat bones. And if you're vegan, you have all these other choices here that are not animal-based. And of course, the daily probiotic with a minimum of 30 to 50 billion organisms. I was grateful for David's recommendation to you. I noticed it had 18 different strains in it. This would be important. Mine only has 10. So you're ahead of me, David. This was a piece that I picked up from functional medicine. Do you all see Dr. Oz over here? No? Okay. There's an American doctor by the name of Oz. They call him the Wizard of Oz. And he has a television show where he's educating people, and he very often will talk about cleansing. And he created a 3-day cleanse with just vegan food and a lot of smoothies and water. And he started to checked the microbiome through the fecal samples, the stool samples. And what he found was during this 3-day cleanse, there was this huge spike in the Bacteroides, which is really what we want, the Enterobacteria, which is also what we want. So cleansing allowed for the gut microbiome to kind of balance itself. It was fascinating. How many of you know about Saccharomyces boulardii? Okay, this is the only friendly organism I'm aware of that is antibiotic resistant. So if somebody has to take an antibiotic, you want to look for this organism and see if they can find it. I think it's well distributed throughout the world. I've been seeing it in every country where I go. And it's very, very valuable for protecting the microbiome while you take the necessary antibiotic, because sometimes it's necessary. And of course, this is a great article about the long-term impacts of antibiotics, which the doctor covered this morning too. Anybody seen this book? It's in German and in English right now. It's an excellent book. I hope she'll translate it into Spanish. It's remarkable. This is a liver tumor out of a cadaver. Cancer immunity is definitely influenced by the microbiome. This just came out in May. I'm going to go through this quickly. I have about 3 minutes left, and I would like to have an opportunity to take questions. We've talked a little bit about the risk of cancer, but we also want to talk about the recovery of cancer. How many of you are using ozone? Sue, doctors, good. This is the anti-cancer remedy for sure. If you don't know about it, please see me after. I'll be teaching about it in Germany in November, because it's so simple to put it in rectally. And you don't have to do a colonic first. Inflammatory bowel disease, gut microbiome. This is directly linked. They found the molecule that directly links the challenges with people that have ulcerative colitis, people that have Crohn's disease. Very interesting. Here's the toxin, microcin B17. This is about a year old. Here's another piece that I found fascinating because they used women in the research. Yay! Most of you know that the drug companies test everything on men, but then they prescribe it to a lot of women. So this is why we have so many women that are sick for one reason or another. But this one was specific to women and arterial stiffness. And of course, the microbiome is the key player once again. Did you know that your microbiome is helping you metabolize sugars and convert glucose properly and give you the strength you need to be fit? This was the piece that my husband just gave me. Look at the date. This was just a few weeks ago. These microbes have an electrical charge. That just made perfect sense to me when I put together the vagus nerve situation and the traveling of the electrical charge. I think, but don't quote me, they're going to find that that's the connection between the gut brain and the head brain. There's this electricity. For now, all they're talking about is using the sewage to power electricity in your home. But you know, they're always looking for ways to make money. So, I will be teaching at my beautiful campus in the Black Forest of Germany, near Basel, on the 5th through the 11th of November. I'm teaching specialized protocols that I've developed over the last 25 plus years. I would invite all of you to join me. It would be an honor and a privilege to have you there. I only take 4 in my groups, and we already have a colleague coming up from South Africa. I've trained people in 32 countries, and it would be a great honor for me to add Spain, make that 33. Cathy, your time is up. How do I stop it? Thank you. You can also follow me on Facebook, Cathy Shea School. I usually post the current research there. So if you're on Facebook, please friend me or like me or whatever it's called on this page. And you can go ahead and keep up to date. And I'm including some wonderful links here, including my Dr. Thomas Rowell, who has a video that I took last year where he stated emphatically that colonics increase the parasympathetic activity. And I honestly think that's the greatest gift we can give people. When I'm on the airplane and people look at my books and they ask me what I do, I used to say, well, I'm a colon hydrotherapist, but they didn't know what I was talking about. Or if they did know what I was talking about, they kind of turned the other way. So now, you know what I say when they ask me, what do you do? What are you reading? What are you studying? I tell them I teach people how to relax. Because that's really what we're doing. We have the potential to increase vagal tone, get that parasympathetic system awakened, and what greater gift than relaxation? Thank you all very much for your attention.